he says like, okay, is flow actually part of Tao? And I look at him and I say, well, I don't think so, but let me tell you a story.
Yeah. In the same way, when you can talk about flow and you talk about the chi of an organ, for instance, like your heart chi, yeah, we always say that when an organ is pumping its blood, then this is the yang, right? But when it is doing that in a perfect way, that means that it's having chi. At that moment, the chi is an indicator of the perfection of its doing its thing, but it's an unconscious flow, right? Because we're not consciously beating our heart every day. Yes, but you can very well compare that with that, because the chi of the heart, which is then not conscious, right? So that's a very important part. It's a non-conscious flow. Then at that moment is still depending on the jing of your body, right? So you control the flow of your heart by the way how you control your body, right? So when you go to the gym and you go really exercise very hard, and at that moment you harden your body, so you break the jing. So actually it's an act of clumsiness what you're doing when you're exercising very hard. And as a result of that, your heart also will be hindered. That means that because of that, the heart muscle has to grow stronger to keep up with the exercises. But it also means that it becomes more stressed. So the chances that something going wrong or that it stumbles or something like this also becomes more large. This is also why the body creates all this dopamine in the brain, because it wants you to stop doing that, and it wants to give you a clear enough mind so that you can decide to stop doing that. Yes? So every time when you have that good feeling from exercises or from anything that you do, is usually because the body is already in a panic, right? And it just tries to get you out of your panic, right? Because the body likes perfect. The body doesn't like imperfect. As we in our mind, we can say, okay, imperfect is nice. Like for instance, you can like for instance, like you have this Japanese art, I forget what is the name. They break something is broken and then they glue it and they give it nice colors or a golden layer or something like this, and then it becomes a new kind of perfect, right? Because it becomes a new kind of aesthetic. Yes. For ourselves, that's not the same. Our scars, whether they are psychological or physical or behavioral or something like this, these are not things that make us more beautiful. Yes, unless when we theatrically exploit them, like in teaching or in comedy or in movies or something like this, because then we exploit them for other people to learn from them, right? But normally in your daily life, it's not like that. In Buddhism, you have the idea of dakis and dakinis, and these are like divine beings full of errors, and because of their errors, actually people have to learn from them about what not to do, right? So you see that example is like that. So your errors are there for other people to see, and they should be seen, because other people would like to avoid them. So the whole process of Chinese medicine in that sense is to help you avoid errors, and that is why Yangshan is at the core, and medicine, acupuncture, massage, and these kind of things are at the periphery. Yes? So your internal functioning is exactly like that. So your internal functioning is subconscious, but it can be organized and managed by managing the body control through exercise, through managing your body, regulating your daily activities, and so on and so on.
And for this, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. So taijiquan I perceive as an extreme sport. So this is something that I want to add to it. Flow is not something of taijiquan, but I see taijiquan as an extreme sport. So there is a similarity in there, but that is where the similarity basically stops. You also see that these sports, they are particular kind of domains, and these different kind of domains, they also have particular downsides and good things. So they have a signature, so to say. And what Stephen Cotter says is that high performance actually produces flow. So you have to have a high performance in something to produce flow. That means that he sees flow as a technical term, and we will see it in that sense. And I want to now make a sidestep towards meditation, because when you're meditating, you actually are experiencing a lot of the same things as you do in flow. For instance, you will feel you have a feeling experience of your best performance. That means that you are really very intensely present in the now of that performance. You are acting, and you are very aware of what you're doing. So you create also sort of a time dilation, which gives you the opportunity to make corrections if necessary. But that is only when you do conscious flow. Most people, they do unconscious flow, so they're just in the flow and they're enjoying the moment. But at least that it feels like you're more deep in the moment, but in fact time seems to go much faster. So that if you do a running period of say 5 hours, the 5 hours are passed before you know it. You get something like that when you do, like in the taijiquan, you do the wide stance. At the moment when you learn to do the wide stance, 10 minutes in the beginning, maybe 15 minutes, half hour is hard work. But at the moment, to graduate, you have to do 8 hours, and you start noticing 8 hours actually is passing before you know it. But you have to put all the time in there to get to that point. And in that sense, the meditative aspect definitely creates a sort of a time dilation aspect. And these aspects, as meditative aspect, they are similar like flow, but they're not the same. There have been over time several researches about flow, and it is definitely not a completely new concept. The first thinkers about research about flow are already from 1987, and one of them is Albert Heim, and he said that when people perform a particular kind of risk, then there's also a shift of consciousness. The same observation is being done in the research about stress. So you can really see that the concepts that are leading to stress also lead to the concept of flow. And I would like to propose that we start seeing flow and stress, and therefore, the burnout and all kind of other damages as a result of stress, as two parts of the same coin. So as long as it goes well, you are in the flow. When you go a little bit too far or you go a little bit wrong, then at that moment it becomes burnout, and it's the same. So stress is the middle position, and then you get either flow or you get burnout, one of the two. It's a matter of practice, I guess. In 1915, there was this Walter Bradford canon, and he said that flow or flow-like situations, they are the result of the interaction of biology, what people are doing by natural means, and also mythology. So that means basically he sees culture and biology interchanged with each other, and this actually is part of the concept of flow according to him. Then there is the name I can't pronounce, so I will just write it down. Mihalny. I have a Daoist friend, a Daoist researcher friend. He also writes books, and he has a similar kind of name. I can't pronounce it. And he says in 1975 that flow is universal. So that flow comes about everywhere. And this is one thing I definitely don't agree with. Flow is not universal, but everybody can feel it as long as you are human. The question is if animals also experience flow, and I don't think they do that. I think they are in a sort of a consciousness loop in some way. They are conscious and they do all kind of things, but they are more in a trance than actually in a flow, and that is one important thing. By the way, in 1901, in research, a researcher reacting on Albert Heim, or a follower of him or something, called William James, he said that when you are in flow, you are amplifying your mental and physical results because of that. And in 1964, that's 1 year after I was born, they have Abraham Maslow. He suggested that success depends on peak performance. So that means that you have to create a peak performance to be able to reach flow. That means you have to really peak, and you have to really up your game to get to that flow thing. And this is actually the strongest indicator that flow is related to stress, and therefore also has particular kind of risks. In 1975, the difficult name guy, he described 8 core characteristics of a flow. One of them is that you are unintentionally concentrated. So that means you're not concentrated on purpose, but you are just busy concentrating, and as a result of that, you are having some experiences to be aware of things. Then in the process of flow, you are resolving yourself, and this is why a lot of people do yoga and also do meditation and so on. They associate flow sometimes with what they're doing. taijiquan the same, and this is why you also have flow yoga, which I call stress yoga, trying to create a stress for yourself, and which is not exactly the same like what we do in our play yoga, but there also we are trying to see how we can create more space inside ourselves, but we do this with a completely different kind of intention. Then for one of the other characteristics that he saw was that there are clear goals. So you have to have a clear goal in mind before you can get into a flow state. And there has to be an immediate feedback. In taijiquan, by the way, we talk about the imaginary boyfriend. So you're always practicing in a meditative state where you are interacting with an imaginary boyfriend, and this imaginary boyfriend actually allows you to give yourself feedback on what you're doing and what is the result, or how you are reacting on somebody else's action and what is then the result, and so on and so on. So that is a very important part. You see there's a lot of similarities between what we do in taijiquan, but not necessarily the same. Then there is a balancing of opportunity and risks also at the same time. And at the moment, when you look at these things, in taijiquan, balance is never an issue. Balance is never anything. We're looking for harmony maybe, but not for balance. So there's no such thing as balancing. Then there has to be a deep concentration. Of course, with everything that you do has to be a deep concentration. Even if you're just eating fries at McDonald's, you have a deep concentration, because you have to better make the best out of that moment. Otherwise, you're just damaging yourself. Then, like in intentional concentration, by the way, I have to say that also before I'm not clear about that. That means that you have to be in the moment, which I always call a marketing concept. Because when you're in the moment, you don't think about the future, you don't think about the past, and you're very easy to be manipulated. So when you're in the flow, also you're easy to be manipulated. But as long as you can manage to stay inside the flow, you don't feel manipulated. Then, of course, the 7th aspect is you have the feeling that you are in control over your skills and over your situation, so that nothing can take you out of your situation. And then, of course, there's this altered sense of time through which you create what in Tibetan Buddhism is called a bardo, namely something with a start, a middle, and an end. So that means that the moment that you're in the flow, the way how you get to the flow and the way how you get out of the flow, these 3 things, they form a time moment. So that is basically your skill to get into the flow, basically. You can basically say as a result that flow is the result of exaggerated activity, right? While in taijiquan, we try to minimize the activity and maximize the results. So flow is not the case. We are actually going against the flow. Water also, in that sense, is seen as not something that is flowing, but that is crashing down from a hill, or even when it comes through a river and it goes very slowly, it just comes down. When it comes on the soil, it slowly crashes into the earth. It is going sinking down. And when a river is flowing or a brook is flowing, it is not flowing really. The surface seems to be like flowing, but in fact it is crashing off the hill. So that is a very important part. When you want to achieve a flow, though, you can say that in the workplace, for instance, there are many groups who are trying to create flow within the workflow, basically, right? And they see their work as something that has to be playful. It's because of the playfulness that you get into a particular kind of workflow, and that is in life the same. If your life is like boring, when you play your life, immediately it becomes more like a game, and then it becomes more easy to enjoy it, and then that can be experienced as a flow. What the idea is, though, that flow in that sense will lead to innovation. That is what it says. So if you are in that stress moment, you're that peak moment, you are creating flow when you are busy creating. And creation means basically creating change, but also creating uncertainty. And so this is why also in modern culture, disruption is very often seen as very valuable. And people who are creating disruption, they do that very often in the flow. And the fact that they have created something is already like amazing. While in fact, the fact that they have created something is just, no, they have created something. Might be a nuclear bomb or a chemical bomb that basically dissolves people in the air. In that workflow, they see that flow is created as a collective thing, and that you have to have a partner. And this is again what we do in taijiquan. Of course, when we have our imaginary boyfriend, we are creating a collection out of us and our imaginary boyfriend to be able to get to that point. But it means, according to these people, you have to sacrifice for the creation process. So you have to sacrifice yourself to get to that point. That's a very important part. Then when you create competition in a work group, you basically go against the flow, and at that moment competition actually is a disruptor for this kind of a creative flow. But the thing is, people, groups and so on, we are not machines, and as a result of that, we can basically say that we cannot really talk about that, because all the things that people talk about when they talk about flow, this is about how to create an engine out of something, out of your work or out of your skill and stuff like this. And as a result of that, hack your system, create the kind of experience that people call flow, and it is a natural. That's basically it. So when we talked at the beginning about is it natural, unnatural, and so on, flow is a natural. Yeah, because you need to create stress to get into flow. At the moment when you are natural, you're minimizing your effort, and therefore you will not get into flow. You will get into space dilation, you get into all these kind of things, but you don't get the disadvantages of the flow, not a risk. I can basically say that flow is something of a no-go when you're practicing taijiquan. On the other end, in wushu, where they try to go into sports, extreme sport, maybe even go into MMA fights and so on, yeah, flow might actually be very practical, because you are out there to damage yourself and to go to a peak experience and to make sure that you are upsetting somebody else, and as a result that win. Not my thing. For taijiquan, it is life, relationships, work, and so on and so on. That's all part of the 24-hour economy. That means you are active for 24 hours a day, and to be a high performer, you have to be very average. You have to be very, how do you say, plain. You have to be very normal, you can say, right? That's why I'm so boring in my videos, because you don't want to excel too much in your things. You want to be good at something, but you don't create a Tao. You're not part of Tao by excelling in something. When you are really very good in taijiquan, everything looks really great and like, wow, this is really like acrobatic or something like this. And at that moment, you're missing the point. So let's get on from this subject, and let's go to the next video in the next period. I hope you like this, and thank you very much. So my dear friends, this was episode number 2. We're going to have an episode number 3, because there is of course also an answer to flow in taijiquan, and we're going to talk about that next time. In the meantime, you can join our channel on our Patreon, as you can see also in our text information, and in the below the video for our address. You can join in our meditation cycle, or you can come study Chinese medicine with us, or any of the other things. Just ask me for a whole list. I should make a website, I think, for this whole thing. If you want to support our channel one way or the other, you can do that either by signing up just as a supporter and as a patron of the channel. You can pay anywhere between $3 and 1,000. So whatever you like. You get all kind of extras when you do that. Of course, when you go to higher images, higher amounts. There is between 160 and 1,000. There is nothing else. Because with 1,000, I am assuming that you don't really care about where your money goes to. I hope you had a lot of fun, and I look forward to see you in the third part. And if you join us and come to our weekly classes, that will be really, really the best, of course, because then we can talk about these topics also from person to person very